Riverton was your typical quiet suburban town. A real picture postcard kind of place. It was a warm Saturday afternoon, and the whole town seemed to be breathing easy. Families were strolling through the park. Kids were shrieking with laughter on the swings. And you couldn't walk a block without somebody waving hello from the local farmer's market. The late afternoon sun was painting everything in this golden, dreamy light. Life moved slow and easy in Riverton, and nothing ever seemed to ruffle its feathers. But for Jalen Carter, a 17-year-old black kid, today wasn't just another lazy Saturday. He was on a mission, find the perfect birthday present for his little sister, Alia. This wasn't some spur-of-the-moment thing. Jalen had been saving up for this for ages, pinching every penny from his job at Parker's Coffee House. He'd picked up extra shifts, skipped hanging out with his friends. Also he could get Alia something really special. After months of hustle, Jalen finally had enough cash to buy a silver bracelet from Belmont Jewelers, the fanciest jewelry store in town. He'd walk past the place almost every day, just staring through the gleaming window, picturing Alia's face lighting up when she saw it. It wasn't just some trinket, it was a symbol of how much he loved his sister. A way of showing her how hard he worked and how he never gave up, no matter what. Jalen walked towards the store, the crumpled bills burning a hole in his pocket. Belmont Jewelers loomed ahead, its windows polished to a mirror shine, reflecting the street back at him. He paused and smoothed down his hoodie, unzipping it a little to show the polo shirt he wore underneath. Jalen knew all too well how some folks saw a black kid in a hoodie, and a little knot of anxiety tightened in his stomach. But he wasn't going to let it get to him today. He just needed to go inside, buy the bracelet, and get out. He took a deep breath, trying to shake off the nerves, and pushed open the heavy glass door. A little bell jingled overhead. Inside, Belmont Jewelers was all plush carpets, velvet displays, and sparkling jewelry under bright lights. The air smelled like expensive perfume and wood polish. The customers were mostly well-dressed, middle-aged women, diamonds glittering on their fingers, probably worth more than Jalen made in a year. They were browsing necklaces, earrings, and rings, the kind of stuff he'd only ever seen in magazines. Jalen could feel the curious stares, the way their eyes flicked over him. But he tried to ignore it. He kept his focus on that bracelet. He walked up to the counter, where a woman with perfectly coiffed blonde hair, a tight smile, and eyes like ice chips stood waiting. Margaret Whitmore. She'd been watching him since he walked in. At first, she just looked bored. But the second her gaze settled on Jalen, something changed. Her eyebrows pinched together, her lips thinned into a line, and her eyes seemed to sharpen, like she was silently asking, "What's he doing here?" Jalen felt the temperature drop a few degrees. He knew this feeling, the feeling that he didn't belong, that he was being judged before he even said a word. But he pushed it down. He gave her a polite smile and pointed to the bracelet in the display case. He asked if he could see it. Margaret Whitmore didn't move. Instead, she crossed her arms and just stared at him. "Are you sure you want to see this?" she asked, her voice dripping with condescension, with doubt. "It's quite expensive, you know." Jalen's stomach clenched, but he kept his voice even, the way his mom had taught him. "Yes, I'm sure," he said. "I have the money." As the bracelet slipped from his grasp, Jalen felt his heart seize. A wave of panic washed over him. But before he could even bend down to pick it up, Margaret let out a piercing shriek that made the whole store jump. "I knew it!" she screamed, her voice like a razor blade slicing through the air. All eyes instantly snapped to them. Jalen froze, his face paling with fear. But he barely had time to react before she was pointing a finger at him. Her face twisted in anger and something that looked a lot like hate. "He deliberately dropped that bracelet, didn't he? Trying to steal it. You think you can pull a fast one on me?" Margaret spat out. Her words were like darts, and in an instant, everyone in the store was looking at Jalen with suspicion. One woman clutched her purse tighter, while others gave him cold, calculating stares, loaded with judgment. Jalen couldn't believe what was happening. He just wanted to buy a gift for his sister, and now he was being accused of being a thief. His heart pounded against his ribs, but he forced himself to stay calm. "No, I wasn't stealing," he said, his voice cracking with stress but firm with conviction. Regardless of what he said, the eyes of those around him didn't waver. The atmosphere in the store had turned thick and heavy, as if Jalen had already been convicted. Margaret, still pointing, quickly grabbed her phone and dialed the police. "I need police right now. We have a thief at Belmont Jewelers. Young black male, wearing a hoodie, tried to steal from us." Jalen stood there, paralyzed. Margaret's words stung like a slap, leaving him reeling. He could feel the weight of everyone's gaze, the judgment and fear in their eyes. A couple of people were surreptitiously pulling out their phones, recording, while others backed away, creating a wide berth as if they were afraid of getting involved. Meanwhile, Margaret continued to speak into the phone, her tone cold and unwavering, leaving no room for doubt. "Definitely a thief. He's even trying to deny it. Hurry up." Jalen felt like he was suffocating. He knew he hadn't done anything wrong, but with all those judging eyes on him, he felt like he'd already been sentenced without a trial. He stood perfectly still, afraid that any movement would only make things worse. The sound of approaching sirens grew louder and louder. The piercing wail seemed to shatter the tranquility of the afternoon, bringing with it a heavy sense of dread, like something irreversible was closing in. Jalen felt his heartbeat pounding in his chest. He knew the cops were coming, and that things could easily spin out of control. He wanted to say something, to explain, but he knew nobody would believe him. Margaret's words had been spoken first, and his wouldn't carry any weight against hers. A moment later, 2 police officers walked into the store, ratcheting up the tension another notch. One of them, a tall man with graying hair, approached Jalen. He looked Jalen straight in the eye and ordered him to raise his hands. "You. Hands up. I need to see your hands," he said, his voice low and commanding. Jalen opened his mouth, but the words wouldn't come. He just stood there, silent. He knew things were getting serious. "I didn't do anything," Jalen managed to say, but his voice trembled, lacking conviction. Margaret kept at it, never letting up. "That's him. I caught him red-handed. Don't let him get away." Her voice was now not just angry but carried a hint of satisfaction, as if she'd been waiting for this moment. The other officer, younger, didn't seem completely convinced by Margaret's story. He looked at Jalen for a long moment, then glanced at the older officer. Jalen could see the hesitation in his eyes, but Officer Blake was clearly the one in charge. Jalen stood there, not daring to resist, feeling like he was caught in a current he couldn't escape. He'd heard stories like this on the news, about young black men getting arrested just for looking suspicious. But being in that situation himself was a whole different ball game. He stood still, not knowing what to do, desperately hoping his mom would show up in time. While Jalen stood there, hands clenched, feeling the helpless frustration rising in his throat, a door at the back of the store swung open. A sharp, confident set of footsteps echoed through the space, instantly changing the atmosphere. A woman strode in, tall and imposing, wearing a crisp blue suit and high heels that clicked authoritatively on the tile floor. Her walk radiated power, and her sharp eyes, like blades, scanned the entire room. She held up a badge, displaying it with absolute confidence to everyone in the store. "I'm Dr. Simone Carter, Chief of Police for Riverton," she announced, her voice firm but laced with authority. She locked eyes with Officer Blake, never wavering, before turning to Jalen, her face softening slightly but still retaining its steeliness. "He's my son," Simone stated, simply, but with a weight that resonated through the store. A breathless silence fell over the room. Officer Blake paused, as if he couldn't quite believe what he just heard. First, his body stiffened. Then a flicker of change crossed his face. Simone didn't need to do much. A simple statement had calmed everything down. The authority of a mother and a leader in law enforcement was undeniable. Blake swallowed hard, trying to maintain a professional demeanor. But his eyes couldn't hide his discomposure. "We received a call about a theft, and we responded accordingly," he said, his voice a little shaky. Simone's expression didn't change, her eyes still cutting into Blake's. "Oh, really? So, you came in here and decided to detain my son with absolutely no evidence, just because he's a black teenager who walked into this store?" Simone's voice was cold but sharp, brooking no argument. Blake stammered, searching for an explanation. But Simone didn't let him continue. "Did you check the security cameras?" Simone asked, without a hint of hesitation. Blake stopped, his lips tightening, and glanced at Officer Doyle, who stood beside him, receiving a slight shrug in return, as if Doyle was reconsidering what just happened. Finally, Blake sighed, his discomfort palpable, and said nothing. "We'll check the cameras," he said. But it was clear he wasn't happy about it. Simone turned her gaze to Margaret, her eyes cold and devoid of sympathy. "Ms. Whitmore, I think it's time you explained to me your so-called story that you've been telling," Simone said, her voice cutting and severe. Margaret, who was now shrinking back, went rigid. In stark contrast to her earlier confidence, she now looked lost. I don't understand. I was just protecting the store's property," she stammered, her face a mask of confusion, unable to find a plausible justification for her actions. Simone simply stared at Margaret, her gaze unwavering. "Do you realize that you accused a young man of a crime he didn't commit based solely on a hunch? And now that the truth is out, you don't even have an apology. Not even an admission of wrongdoing." The atmosphere in the store was heavy. The store manager, who had remained silent throughout the ordeal, now scurried to the back room to review the security camera footage. As the video played, everyone clearly saw, Jalen had simply fumbled the bracelet, accidentally dropping it. There was no theft, no deception, just a young man trying to buy a gift for his sister. When the video ended, silence fell over the crowd. The quiet was thick, like a heavy fog. Officer Doyle sighed, rubbing his forehead, while Blake stood motionless, his frustration and embarrassment plain on his face. Simone turned back to Blake, her eyes like ice. "So, are you still going to arrest my son?" Her voice rang out, full of power, making everything seem to halt before her. Blake didn't answer. He just stood there, hesitant, then looked at Simone and Jalen one last time, before silently turning and walking out of the store. Simone watched Blake go for a moment, then turned to Jalen, her eyes softening. "Let's go, son," she said, gently but firmly. Jalen didn't speak, just nodded, following his mother out of the store. As they stepped through the glass doors, Jalen felt like an enormous weight had been lifted from his shoulders. But in his heart, there remained feelings he couldn't quite articulate. He knew this fight wasn't over. Every small victory, like today, was a reminder that while you could win the battle, the war against racism was far from won. As Jalen and his mom stepped out of the store, the air outside felt marginally lighter. The late afternoon sun still cast a golden glow, but it no longer held the same sense of peace it had before. Jalen took a deep breath, trying to shake off the tension and weariness that clung to him. The scene inside the store played on repeat in his mind, Margaret's hateful glare, the false accusations, and the judging eyes of the surrounding customers. Simone walked beside him, silent, but he could feel the anger and exhaustion radiating from her with every step. Simone had always been a rock, a powerful woman, but today, the toll of it all was etched on her face, not just from what had happened, but from everything she had faced over the years, the relentless fight against racism, the societal biases, and the injustices that her own son had fallen victim to. "You okay?" Simone finally asked, her voice gentle, but tinged with worry. Jalen looked at his mother, not answering immediately. He shook his head, then finally spoke. "I don't know. I feel angry and tired. But mostly, I feel like nothing changes. Today I might win. But tomorrow, someone else will have to go through the same thing." Simone frowned, turning to look at her son. Her eyes filled with empathy. She understood what Jalen was going through. She knew the feeling of being suspected solely because of the color of your skin. The constant struggle to fight for the right to be equal, to be treated fairly like everyone else. She had faced similar challenges, and now her son was experiencing it too. "You're not wrong, Jalen. You did the right thing. But I also understand that this fight isn't just about one victory. It's a long battle. And today we just took one step," Simone said softly. "But you stood up for yourself. And that's what matters most." Jalen remained silent, looking down. He felt the warmth of his mother's words, but he couldn't deny the turmoil inside him. He didn't want to be the person who constantly had to fight to prove his worth. He just wanted to be normal, to be treated fairly, without being judged based on his appearance, on the color of his skin. As they approached Simone's car, she opened the door for Jalen and then got in beside him. The atmosphere inside the car was quiet, broken only by the gentle hum of the engine. The silence was heavy, not just from the quiet, but from everything that had just transpired. The emotions swirling inside Jalen seemed impossible to put into words. Simone drove in silence, her eyes fixed on the road ahead. Jalen didn't say anything, but his mother could sense the fatigue in every movement. Simone reached out and took Jalen's hand in hers, giving it a gentle squeeze. "We'll keep fighting, son. No one gets to define your worth but you." Jalen looked at his mother, and though his heart was still heavy with sadness and disappointment, he felt a flicker of comfort from her unwavering strength. He knew that his mother would always be there, his protector and the one who would help him navigate these difficult times. 3 days later, news of the incident at Belmont Jewelers spread like wildfire across the media. News outlets published articles criticizing Margaret Whitmore's actions and the shortcomings in the police's investigation. Social media exploded with outrage, and almost immediately, Belmont Jewelers was bombarded with one-star reviews on Yelp. Margaret was immediately suspended from her job, and there were rumors that she would be fired after an investigation was conducted. An official statement was released from the store, condemning the act of racism and promising to implement measures to improve employee recruitment and training. The police also launched an internal investigation into Sergeant Blake after security camera footage showed that he had acted too hastily without conducting a thorough investigation. Jalen sat in his living room, scrolling through the news articles and online posts. He didn't feel joy or happiness about any of it. Instead, he felt tired. Tired of what had happened. And tired because he knew that even though this specific incident had been resolved, the larger problem still persisted. He was still a young black man, facing prejudice and discrimination in society. Just then, Alia ran into the room, wearing a silver bracelet on her wrist and her face glowing. "Jalen, look. Mom got me this awesome bracelet," Alia exclaimed, her voice full of excitement. Jalen looked at his sister, and a faint smile spread across his face. Even though everything wasn't perfect, even though the fight wasn't over, at least his sister was happy. And in that moment, that was enough. He knew that even if the world might not change overnight, at least he had stood up and done what was right. And that was the most important thing of all. Jalen forced a smile, watching Alia happily showing off the silver bracelet that her mom had bought her. In Alia's eyes, the gift was just a symbol of love and caring. But for Jalen, it was a painful reminder of everything he had just gone through. He felt a bittersweet pang seeing his sister so happy, coupled with the frustration that he was the one who had to bear all the injustice. Isn't it a beautiful gift, Jalen? Elia asked, her eyes shining with excitement. Jalen nodded, trying to muster a genuine smile, even though his heart was still full of mixed emotions. Yeah, Ali. It's really pretty. Happy birthday, sweetie, he said gently. Elia gave him a quick hug, then ran off to show her mom. Jalen watched his sister, but his thoughts were still swirling around the events that had just transpired. He couldn't stop replaying the scene in the store, where he had been treated like a criminal simply because of the color of his skin. Even though his mother had won today, and even though he felt a sliver of relief that justice had been served, it wasn't enough to erase the pain and exhaustion he had endured. Simone stood beside Jalen, watching her son for a long moment before gently speaking. You okay, Jalen? Jalen didn't answer immediately. He just sat there, clenching his hands, looking around the room. His eyes seemed to be pondering something distant. Mom, I know you did everything you could, but I'm tired. I feel like this fight never ends, he said, his voice hoarse, unable to hide his disappointment. Simone looked into Jalen's eyes, her own softening, but still laced with sadness. I know you're tired, and I understand how you feel, but you have to remember that every time we stand up and speak the truth, we're making this world a little better. Even if it's just a small step. And you're not fighting alone. I'm always here. Jalen looked at his mother, and in that moment, he felt the warmth of her love. He knew that his mother was always behind him, supporting and protecting him. But sometimes, it wasn't enough to soothe the pain he had to bear. I know, Mom, but I can't help but feel like no matter what I do, people will always see me through a lens of prejudice, Jalen said, his voice softer but full of weariness. Even if we win today, what then? Tomorrow will be another fight. With other people. Every day. Every moment. I have to fight these same things. Simone sighed, very softly, as if she were carrying an unspeakable burden of sorrow. You don't have to fight alone. I've been through these things, and I understand that feeling. But you have to remember that change doesn't happen overnight. Every time we stand up, every time we speak the truth, no matter how small or big, it's a step forward. And even if sometimes you feel like you've failed, the truth is, you've won. You're a winner. Jalen didn't respond, just looking at Alia, who was happily playing with her new bracelet. A faint smile flickered across his lips. Maybe, in this moment, the most important thing was that his sister was happy, and he could do that for her. Simone looked at her son with affection, then turned towards the door. We'll do great things, Jalen. Every day, every small action, contributes to changing this world. Jalen just nodded, although in his heart, that statement wasn't enough to make him forget what had happened. But at least, in this moment, he felt a glimmer of hope. Perhaps real change wouldn't be easy, but like his mother had said, every step was a victory. Outside the window, the afternoon sun gradually faded, giving way to the darkness of night. But Jalen felt like he had stepped through a new door. And though the road ahead was long, at least he didn't have to walk it alone. He had his mother, and that made him feel stronger than ever. The story of Jalen Carter and his confrontation with racial bias at Belmont Jewelers is a stark illustration of the injustices that many young black people face in society. While Jalen isn't alone in experiencing suspicion and judgment simply because of his skin color, his journey reflects the resilience and strength of an individual who stands up for the truth. Although Jalen won in that particular moment, he understands that the fight doesn't end there. Every time we confront discrimination, we're not only fighting for ourselves but also for those who come after us. For a more just and equitable society. Lessons learned. Jalen's story teaches us that resilience and courage in standing up for yourself are crucial. Even though Jalen faced false accusations, he didn't give in. He chose to stand firm and defend the truth. Change doesn't happen overnight, But every small action has value. Despite setbacks in the fight against racial discrimination, every small step, every act of defiance, contributes to creating change, even if it's not immediately visible. Family and support from loved ones can be an invaluable source of strength. Jalen's mother, Simone, was not only his protector but also a great source of encouragement, helping Jalen feel stronger when facing adversity. Never lose hope. No matter how difficult things get, while the world may not change immediately, we can be a part of that change by continuing to fight and never giving up. Jalen's story isn't just about a single encounter, it's a reminder of the long-term struggle that we must all continue, to build a more equitable society for everyone, regardless of skin color, gender, or background.